Like, talk about a fucking coward. Hiding behind kids that he's sending into a doomed war effort to hide his own incompetence sounds about fitting for an administration led by a guy who himself avoided service because of elusive bone spurs.
Brian Tyler Cohen absolutely unloaded on Pete Hegseth, a man many people see as one of the biggest embarrassments in modern American politics. It's honestly unbelievable that Pete Hegseth is serving as the Secretary of Defense. In this video, we're going to break down Brian Tyler Cohen's sharp response after Hegseth's terrible appearance before Congress, where Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff pressed him with tough questions and exposed some major weaknesses in his testimony. I'll also give you my own thoughts and reactions because there's a lot to unpack here. So let's jump right in and take a closer look at everything together.
We never expected they would stop having capabilities to shoot. The question is at scale against an opponent like the United States of America, which went toe-to-toe with them and Iran couldn't.
You stated on March 8th, day 9 of the war, on 60 Minutes, you assured the American people of Iranian surrender. Does that remain your prediction?
Ultimately, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon to threaten the United States of America. That has been the objective, and it remains so.
So just to review, you will not answer whether your statement made on the 14th day of the war that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and made combat ineffective was a truthful statement to the American people as you sit here and ask for tens of billions more for the conflict.
Senator's time has
expired. A historic and effective military campaign against the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Won't answer the question.
Senator Peters is recognized.
That right there is why Jon Ossoff is one of the most effective communicators in the Democratic Party. And it puts on full display the ineffectiveness of someone like Pete Hegseth, who may love his little Fox News hits and his pre-screened interviews with the few right-wing journalists who are still allowed into the Department of Defense. But once he's actually confronted with a real question and a real follow-up, he relies not on the facts, but on his own belligerence. If Hegseth's testimony shows us anything, it's that the goalpost will always move with this administration. You'll remember that last summer, the strike on Iran was supposed to have been to obliterate Iran's nuclear capabilities. Then 6 months later, we apparently needed to go in again to strike what we'd already obliterated previously. Then the goal was regime change, wherein we went from Ayatollah Khomeini to Ayatollah Khomeini. Then it was to control the Strait of Hormuz, which, by the way, was already open before the war even began. On issue after issue, this administration has only moved the goalposts so that they can accomplish nothing and yet still, miraculously, give themselves credit for some non-existent success. The reality is that we didn't achieve some huge victory, because if we did, and I'm going to use some basic logic here, we wouldn't still be there. When Spain beat Argentina this weekend at the World Cup and got the trophy, they didn't keep playing. You know why? Because when you win, you stop. The fact that we are still in Iran suggests that maybe, just maybe, we didn't win this war any more than when George Bush declared mission accomplished in 2003, only for the US to be at war for another decade. And in terms of Iran's military being rendered combat ineffective, if Pete Hegseth is telling the truth, why are we still fighting? If they were combat ineffective, wouldn't we be able to do anything we wanted? Wouldn't we have no problem taking over the Strait of Hormuz? No problem decimating their nuclear enrichment facilities, which we already promised happened? Look, I'm not a military expert. I don't claim to be a military expert, but I do have common sense. And if all of these things that Pete Hegseth is swearing up and down are happening, then why are we still there, still fighting, still spending money, and still unable to achieve our goals? The reality is that Pete Hegseth is lying through his teeth because he is unqualified to run this department, just as Trump is unprepared for this war. And Hegseth's only tactic here is to just throw temper tantrums and wave around jingoistic platitudes like this.
The destruction of missiles, and yet the missiles that we saw hit recent targets are actually somehow more lethal, more deadly, more maneuverable than what we have seen in the past. So they're obviously improving their munitions. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Reminding everybody it was open before the war. Prices were lower for everybody until the war, and it still remains closed. And of course, tragically, people, service members, our warfighters, who we care deeply about, are still dying. So what's different? Mr. Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth.
I think your characterization of this incredible effort as a failure is reckless. And I think it's irresponsible. And I think it smears the sacrifice of the troops that are out there making on behalf of the American people to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Shame on you and others who call this a quagmire and a failure, and then you want to turn around and say you support the warfighter. Either you do or you don't.
Is the nuclear material still there,
I can get you a ticket out to CENTCOM and talk to what those Americans are doing and how committed they are to this effort and how they want to ensure that Iran never threatens their families with a nuclear weapon. That's the kind of intensity that our warfighters have about making sure that Iran isn't capable of doing that.
Secretary Hegseth, if you listen to my comments, you would would have heard me say how amazing our warfighters are.
I heard failure. And the word heard, I heard exactly
I will
what you
tell
said.
you how I use the word
Exactly
failure,
what you
because
said.
I use the word failure to their leaders. You, sir, are the failure, not the men and women who are on that front line, not the men and women who hold up their honor with distinction. But if there's a lack of a winning strategy, they're in harm's way. Their leaders have failed them. And that's what's happening. We have political leadership. You don't have a strategy. You don't have a long-term plan to actually win this war. Win the war. The men and women are going to be able to do it, but they need to have leadership. When will you show leadership? When will you show leadership?
Why don't you show some leadership and stand up to your fellow Democrats who won't fund the troops, who stand and play partisan politics while you don't give us the money? You want to stand up here and talk about the troops? You won't show any political courage to actually fund our department because you have Trump derangement.
Trump derangement syndrome. Trump derangement syndrome. I really like the point Brian Tyler Cohen made right at the beginning about how aggressive and confrontational so many of Trump's allies are, because that description fits them perfectly. They show up acting rude, arrogant, smug, and always looking for a fight instead of doing the job they're actually there to do. They could walk into these hearings and say, Congress, we know we need to work together to secure more funding for this conflict, and here are the reasons we believe it's necessary, even though many Americans don't support it. Let's find a solution together and figure out the best path forward. But that's not what happens. Instead, Pete Hegseth, the king of bad attitudes, walks in pointing fingers, talking over people, and acting more like an angry kid than the Secretary of Defense. That's exactly how he comes across. And when your boss is Donald Trump, who many critics say behaves like a man-child himself, it's not exactly surprising. As Brian Tyler Cohen pointed out, none of these people seem qualified for the positions they hold, and that's a big reason why the country keeps finding itself stuck in one mess after another. Now let's hear a little more from the testimony before we get back to more of what Brian Tyler Cohen had to say.
Actually commit to anything meaningful. So I put this on you, Senator.
Secretary Hegseth, you have trillions, you have over $1 trillion. You're asking for $1.5 trillion. It's not a question of money. It's a question of leadership and understanding what it takes to actually win.
Political cowardice of Democrats who won't fund the troops.
Yes, apparently when you confront a government that is sending American kids to die in a disastrous war with no plan, somehow that is an attack on the troops. Like, talk about a fucking coward. Hiding behind kids that he's sending into a doomed war effort to hide his own incompetence sounds about fitting for an administration led by a guy who himself avoided service because of elusive bone spurs. So good on John Ossoff for holding Pete Hegseth's feet to the fire, but no amount of gaslighting is going to change the reality on the ground, nor will it change what Americans can see with our own eyes, that this White House is only further bungling a war that they swore they would never get us into in the first.
I don't think anyone could have summed it up much better than Brian Tyler Cohen did at the end there. In his view, this is a war the United States should never have entered in the first place. And he argues that a large majority of Americans recognize that. He also says the remaining public support mostly comes from Trump's most loyal supporters. When Brian Tyler Cohen called Pete Hegseth a coward, he clearly believed the label fit based on the way Hegseth handled himself during the hearing. Instead of looking confident and leading with a serious plan, Hegseth came across looking nervous and defensive. A real leader would walk into Congress and say, "We need to work together. We need your support, and we're here to explain why we're asking for additional funding and how we're going to move forward." That's the kind of approach many people would expect from someone in charge. But according to Brian Tyler Cohen, Pete Hegseth wasn't focused on building support or answering difficult questions. Instead, he seemed more interested in putting on a performance for Donald Trump and scoring political points against his opponents. That's the criticism Brian was making throughout the video. He argues that too many people in the current administration are not qualified for the positions they hold, and he hopes the country eventually returns to leadership filled with experienced and capable officials. In his opinion, it wouldn't be difficult to find someone better suited for the role than Pete Hegseth. Now I want to hear what you think about Brian Tyler Cohen's comments on Pete Hegseth and these congressional hearings. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content.